Alright, so today we're gonna check out the end game of Monster Hunter Wilds, which is basically where 90% of the things happen. That is why in this video we're going to go over some of the new systems, best ways to make the most out of them, as well as some mistakes to avoid along the way. So without further ado, let's jump right in it. Now, the moment you reach high rank, you're going to want to progress further into the main story chapters and not really stop for anything, because you're going to progressively unlock higher accessible high rank levels. So it's going to be level 15, then level 20, then 30, 40, up until like level 40. Basically every 5 or 10 levels will unlock a new story chapter, which is going to, upon a completion, unlock the next levels and so on. Which brings me to the next point. Side missions are going to give you a ton of XP. Not only do you get XP from defeating the hunts, but you also get XP from giving in those missions. Basically, it's going to be 2 or 3 levels every one you complete. So in between these moments, in between these thresholds of the main campaign, make sure you do these. And also, especially after level 40, once you're completely done with all of that, make sure you also make use of them to quickly gain high rank levels. More things will unlock for you as you progress to level 50 and even more so at level 100. Now, the other thing that's going to unlock close the moment you reach high rank is going to be the forecast. So if you pay attention to any of the regional maps, you're going to notice that now you have 3 tabs instead of just the first one. And the third one is going to be all about the forecast, both for the weather as well as for the upcoming spawns. So every in-game day is actually corresponding to 1 hour or 60 minutes. And within those 60 minutes, we can see the breakdown of that particular day from dusk all the way to dawn. But alongside that, at the bottom, we can see the list of all the possible spawns. So let me break it down for you exactly what it means. Basically, you're going to have minute 0 right here at this line, right next to the monster icons or event icons, because some maps will also have events coming up. That's minute 0. That means if it's already here, it means that creature is spawned. For example, Blangonga, which is very close to that line, we can see that it's actually spawned at the current time in this map. So everything from this point on is going to give us an idea in how many minutes the next spawn will happen. For example, Gaikperos will spawn in about 15 minutes, give or take, if we were to line it up to the chart right here at the top with the weather forecast and the minutes. So that's going to be pretty much afternoon in this region, and it's going to remain active for the whole night until next morning. And next morning, once morning breaks into daylight, we're going to have Quematris also spawning, but that's going to be in about 45 minutes from this point on. And it goes even deeper because this is going to now let you plan ahead for some of the stuff that comes later down the line. Other maps will have even more mobs and events. So in this case, let's say we go to the oil well basin and we can see the current spawns are just a couple of Nersilla, Rompopolos and whatnot. But if we go at the last tab, we can see all of the upcoming spawns as well. This includes events like resources, but also upcoming bosses. So let's say, for example, you want a boss to farm a specific material and you want it as high star rating as possible. You can take a glimpse at this and you can plan ahead what to do within the next hour. Say, for example, I want a tempered Rompopolo for some of its mats. We can see that it's going to spawn in about 35 minutes from this point on, and specifically right as we're about to go into the next morning and when the season changes to, it's not really inclemency. I think that this is going to be follow as we go from plenty to follow, but that's going to be tempered Rompopolo right here. The same goes for Artian and all others. And the last one that will spawn will be Arkveld. Basically after 50-minute mark, that's when we're gonna see him spawning too. Now, once you reach high rank 20, this is when you're going to unlock tempered monsters, and with this also Artian weapons. Basically, the game now lets you craft your own weapons however you see fit by combining different parts that only drop from the tempered monsters. So tempered monsters will now drop weapon fragments of different rarities. It starts with 5, then 6 and 7, and after appraisal they come out rarity 6, 7 and 8 respectively, with 8 of course being the strongest and the ones I'm going to show you how to farm fastest. Now, besides this, every part has an elemental type, fire eyes, but pretty much every single one in the game is going to be there. And what you want to do is to actually make sure that all the parts feature the same elemental, as that's going to increase the damage by max. So in this case, let's say if I only go with, I don't know, water, then pick another, for example, water, but if I go with the third one, thunder, I get 230 in terms of water damage. However, if I change the last one to another water, it's now 260. So that's going to give me like plus 30 extra elemental damage, which can be very helpful. However, if you don't mix at least 2 of these parts to have the same element, then you're not going to get any elemental at all. So let's say you pick all different elements. As you can see, we don't get anything over there in that regard. So that is why make sure that at least 2 of them feature the exact same element so that you can actually have it featured over there. And in this case, yeah, also go with an elemental infusion weapon. If you don't want that and want raw damage instead, you can just mix 3 different elements and have the raw damage / attack. Besides that, you also see that many of the Artian bonuses are either attack or affinity. So basically, this is what it means. Every affinity infusion is plus 5% to your max affinity, and every attack infusion is plus 5 raw damage. So let me give you an example. If I were to go with pure affinity, in this case, we're going to get plus 20% affinity. That's 15 from these 3 and plus 5 from the base affinity that every single one of the Artian weapons have. If I were to change these purely with attack, for example, then it's going to be plus 15 extra attack, but only 5% affinity. So again, decide if you want to go more raw damage or more elemental. This depends both on your playstyle, your build, and the weapon. Once you've crafted this, the final part is to reinforce / upgrade this. Every Artian weapon can be reinforced up to 5 times, so every level of upgrade will further boost its stats by a random value every single time. So in the end, this can become one of your strongest weapons, at least at this stage in the game. Even in the later stages, you can actually get some very good options over here that rival some of the other best in the game. Now, it is going to be a bit expensive in terms of the reinforcement mats. These don't come cheap, obviously, but also not too rarely either. You also have the Fire Festival that will give you some of these every now and then. So I was using just those to upgrade 3 Artian weapons, and I still have an access of them. I think that you're going to be good with this, even if you go with a couple of weapons and max them out 5 times. Now, eventually, if you want to farm out the best tier 8 of these parts, you're going to want to go for the duo tempered boss encounters. I believe that these are going to start spawning around level 50, give or take, in a high rank. But you can also force spawn them by simply going to Ice Shard Cliffs or any of the other high-end maps and change the weather to inclemency. Time of day does not matter, and more often than not, you should see some of these duo tempered boss encounters appearing, and pay special attention to the bonus rewards. In this case, we have 7 tier 7 unappraised Artian parts, which once we get discovered them, they will become tier 8. And that is if you also use a voucher, for example, you can get even more. So I got 11 of them in total from this very fight by just fighting both of the bosses and defeating them. You don't even have to kill them, you can also capture them for extra materials. That voucher, by the way, is a daily login bonus, so you're going to get it every single day to use it in these circumstances, for example. But up until this point, just go with the regular tempered monster hunts and you're still going to get enough parts to at least get something going. Now, these duo boss encounters I mentioned are called Great Hunts, and they come in a little bit later. I'm going to show you how to unlock them in just a little bit, but they are some of the best because look how many bonus rewards you get. Sometimes it can be those Artian parts, but it can be something else as well. This is going to depend on which one spawns, but it's one of the best sources of farming exactly what you need, gear and crafting mats likewise. Now, as far as I can see from the footage I had before, it seems that this unlocked for me specifically upon finishing the side mission called The Struggle to Survive in the Ruins of Wyveria. However, I'm pretty sure that these are going to unlock, these Great Hunts will unlock for every single map once you completed all the side mission quest chains within those regions. It's just that in this case, I finished all of those in those Ruins of Wyveria, so that's when those Great Hunts started spawning in that specific region, but the same was the case with Ice Shard Glyphs. So if you want to have these Great Hunts popping up for you, make sure you finish all the side quests like I mentioned in the previous videos. You're going to see them popping out a new quest in that chain every time you gain like 5 or 10 HR levels, but by the time you reach level 50, this is going to be enough to pretty much finish all of those side quests so that you have access to the Great Hunts. Second of all, and all of this will become even more useful as you progress, pay attention to the field survey history. This is going to record the last 16 encounters that you had and then you can spend a few of your guild points to save them permanently in your investigation screen so that you can repeat them later on. Because guess what? Some of these encounters, especially the super high-end tier ones, can give you some amazing rewards, such as the double tempered spawns or special bosses that you sometimes see super rarely spawning on the map. When you see one of those, go ahead, try to defeat it, and if it's a monster for which you want a set from, go ahead and also save it from the field service so that you have it later on as a repeatable mission. Otherwise, also look at the locales, because every now and then you're going to see encounters popping up on the list that give a ton of rewards. You can see them listed right beneath the bosses. So you can go ahead and immediately create a quest from them right here from the locale screen, which is going to send you immediately on that hunt without having to manually fast travel and search for them. And the same applies to singular mob spawns as well, by the way. If you're early on, you can also use that in the same way in the early stages. And finally, on the navigation section, whenever a new quest giver or special item spawns on the map, especially ones that only appear during severe weather changes like the inclemency, you're going to see them highlighted at the top before the monsters. And in this case, you can immediately set a waypoint right to them or have them highlighted on the map by just pressing the right click in this case or whatever button it is to set the highlight. So if it's quest givers who want to speak to you, you can just quickly set up a map marker to them and more easily navigate towards them. Equally, in the case of those rare resources spawning during inclemencies, you can just see them at a glance right from here if you highlight them. But let's also go over the melding pot. You unlock this in low rank, but it becomes even better as you progress in high rank, specifically all the way to level 100. But this is going to be useful both to hunt for high-grade decorations as well as high-grade Artian weapon parts using various materials you already own or can farm for. So let's go over each specific section and what it does. The first one is Wyverian Melding. This is basically going to let you RNG farm for a specific decoration category, so either armor or weapon. In this case, if you go with the ancients, that's going to be the highest tier so far, tier 6 or rarity 6 in this case. So for example, in this case, it requires 60 points to get one random armor decoration of rarity 6, and we can see how much our materials have in terms of points when we consume them. That is why in this case, I mentioned in the previous video that doing the daily bounties is so good because you get at least one, if not two, silver melding tickets that cost 300 points. So we can actually get multiple of these decorations. Other materials can have higher points too, like for example the crushed crystals, which you get by defeating guardian enemies, give 20, and there are other collectibles from the environment that give similar amounts of points. Now, besides this, there's also the meld decorations, in which you avoid any RNG and directly meld the decorations that you want. If you want attack or critical strike or anything that completes your build, this is where you do it. However, earlier, before level 100, you don't have access to high-grade decorations just yet, just the level 1s. So for that, you're going to need to progress up until you reach level 100, and then you're going to unlock much better variants. So that's why in the early stages, you may still want to use the RNG method, as it can give you some pretty good rarity 6 options in there, even though you might not get the ones that you want. And finally, there's also the meld relics. This is what's going to give you extra ancient weapon fragments that you're going to use to craft Artian weapons. And if you pay attention to the points here, Wyverian bloodstones will give you the highest amount of points. And guess what? You get Wyverian bloodstones by popping tempered wounds. So tempered enemies will feature specific wounds on them besides the ones you create, but also old scars from old battles. Those are the tempered wounds. You can clearly see them on their bodies. So if you reopen them, which takes a long time, and if you pop them again, this is what's going to drop those Wyverian bloodstones. So use them, get the bloodstones, and buy them from over here. These are going to be the max ones we currently have available. Now, besides this, another thing you should be careful about is going to be the smelting foundry, which is going to be at the oil well basin. It's basically this NPC right here. Now, this is something that you always want to collect because festival shares from the Fire Festival will give you many of the crafting mats that you need for some of the stuff we talked about. For example, some of these festival shares are going to be very useful to upgrade those Artian weapons we talked about, but there are others in there that are very good. However, be very, very careful and not spend any of your hard-earned resources to buy them just yet. This is like a worst case scenario when you really want something like or a calcite or I don't know, because if you look at the points needed, it costs a lot. And as you can see, even some of your most rare crafting materials are barely a few points worth, and it's not worth it to give them in unless you really have a huge access. So this is something that comes in much later, after maybe weeks or even months of playing, when you have hundreds of all of these resources. It's even more egregious if you take a look at the heavy armor spheres, which costs 5,000 points per. And if you take a look at the cost of your items, it's only the super rare creature parts that give any respectable numbers, like 5 to 800 points, mostly from the beast gems or super rare fluids. Only those are actually going to make a dent into that cost. So that is why in the meantime, look at the dual hunts we talked about before on the map as they appear, and using the map tricks I told you at the beginning of the video, as that's going to give you a lot of these items for absolutely free. And better variants will unlock as you progress in the game, and you will get higher rarity tier 1s as you progress into high rank. Now there's one final thing I want to cover, and that's going to be the gather boost, and you're going to eventually see this, especially once you unlock all of the side missions. That's why they are so important. This is going to be another thing that activates once you finish everything in a region. So upon doing so, you're going to see missions like these popping up where a settlement is having some difficulty or trouble. And if you go ahead and just activate it right there, it's going to point you towards a hunt. Completing that hunt is going to give you the gather boost for that specific region. So now when you visit villagers and vendors in that region, they will have a heavy discount to what they normally give you. And this is especially useful for the trade-in items. There are many in there that may be quite costly or require a few too many trade-in materials that you may not want to spare. In this case, it can bring you there a little bit quicker and also give you a bunch of discounts. And like I said before, some of the items these vendors can give can be quite useful, including high tier grade crafting mats, but other useful items can be found there too. Do all of this and you're pretty much going to be golden with everything that the game throws at you. But on that note, also let me know down below in the comments if there's anything else that I have missed. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.